Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology. This video follows on the video I just did, which is basically about why the academic approach may not be the best for practitioners. And I got into that because I said, look, it seems like there's this sort of false choice that you have to make as an astrologer. And that choice is between, on one hand, being this like loosey-goosey new age, basically making it up as you go along, pick it up in 15 minutes, sort of approach that everyone thinks is unique and then ends up being like everybody else, every other modern, astrologer that's doing it. Again, not to dump on modern astrology, but this is there's a lot of people out there that are kind of like skimming along and doing like I said, the loosey-goosey approach. So a lot of people will look at that and say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I want to be serious about this. I want to take a rigorous approach. So what seems to be the way to do that is, like I said, the academic approach. That seems very solid. You're looking at all these books and all these references and everything. It's in and there's a lot of respect for academics. And that seems like that would be the approach. So I went into that in the previous video and I said, look, the focus of the academic is different than the focus of the practitioner in any field. Because basically the academic is writing about it, not doing it. And there's, again, this idea that if you do it, then you're too involved, you're too subjective, and you want to be objective. But anyhow, I go into a lot of detail about that. And so the further problem is that academics are coming out of an atheistic materialistic perspective. And that means that like this stuff isn't really real. So like I said, it's like going to an expert on pancake making to learn how to make pancakes, and they have never cooked a pancake. They've never eaten a pancake. They've never seen a pancake. And in fact, they don't even think that pancakes exist. That's not a good way and not a good approach in terms of teaching you how to actually make pancakes. And so one of the things I said was, you can be a rigorous practitioner and you can escape from like I said, this sort of a middle path between the loosey-goosey and the academic, which I both see as really not being the most effective in terms of practicality. And so that kind of leaves over the questions, what do I mean by a rigorous practitioner? So as I started thinking about it, I realized that it's, I think, easy to get confused about it. What that really means. There's a tendency to assume that has to do with technique. And if you use a lot of technique, that's rigorous. So I think this goes back to a really basic sort of components of divination. So any type of divination you're doing, if it's tarot or, if it's pendulum or, if you're psychic, if you're the Oracle of Delphi or whatever, there's this interplay between two factors. And those two factors are technique and then intuition, judgment, psychic ability, divine inspiration, however you want to. That's a little bit of a complicated, but they're all sort of combined in there. So you might really want to call it a shorthand, call it intuition. So intuition and then technique. And so if you're dealing with something like medieval Renaissance astrology, you're going to be very, very heavy on the technique. But nevertheless, the intuition is there as well. And if you're doing something like, it's like a psychic, then it's very heavily intuition based, but there is a little bit of technique. I mean, for example, you might have a crystal ball. If you're doing a tarot reading, you might have the tarot as a way to sort of a jumping off point, and you're very quickly accessing that intuition. On the other hand, if you're doing, say, like horary astrology, you're going to look at the chart. The chart's going to lay out this framework for you and give you a range of possibilities. And then you're going to use your intuition to choose among the possibilities that are mapped out in the chart. You're not going to overthrow the chart with your intuition, but the intuition helps you pick among the possible things that are available in the chart. So for example, in a horary chart, someone comes in and asks about a relationship. The planet that rules the first house is going to represent the person asking the question, the querent, and the planet that rules the seventh house would be representing the person that they're asking about, the potential relationship. If the planet that rules the seventh is afflicted, then you could say that the person is unable, unwilling, or unsuitable for the relationship. But which of those, so it's a no, but exactly what their reason for being not in the relationship is going to depend on other chart factors, but also very much on intuition. That will help you choose that. And in fact, in the Centiloquium, which is 100 aphorisms that are traditionally attributed to Ptolemy, number 1, the very first aphorism says, basically, you need to rely on your science, on your technique, but also on this inspiration. And that only through divine inspiration, basically only through intuition, are you going to be able to get the completely accurate answer in the divination. So in any type of divination, you've always got this interplay, again, between technique and intuition. And so And the relative percentage of that is going to depend on the practitioner and also on what methodology, what you're doing for divination. But what I recognized about that is there's this tendency to look at the technique-heavy forms and assume that that's more rigorous. And, again, there is this scholarly approach that you can take. You can know a lot about the origin, like, for example, medieval Renaissance astrology. You can understand the history. You can understand the various sources where they come from, who wrote them, the social background. You can understand the technique in a very detailed way. You can have it very laid out very logically. You can have a big pile of books. I mean, when I teach, I have my students actually cite the sources. So if they're going to say, this is the indication of the chart, and I want them to cite to a page and title of a traditional source to be able to back that up. It's very much comes from sort of a legal background, and when you write a brief, you have to cite to legal authority for every proposition. You can't just come and say, oh, so everybody knows such and such. You have to say, okay, this court case or this statute or something like that. It's a very logical method, also very academic. I mean, if you're going to cite to, somebody said something, well, where's your source for that? What's your proof? What's the evidence of that? So I think it's very useful. It keeps you very much on track. And I think that is it's rigorous in terms of your technique. But the problem is that, the downfall of the technique, the technical sides, is you get too focused on technique and you forget about the intuition. So this, I think, is one of the things that people start arguing about with the best house system, this individual pieces of it, and they think that's what's most important. They think that the technique is sort of the be-all and end-all, and if they just put together the techniques properly, the answer will automatically come about, and they're not thinking about the intuition side of it. That you really need to be the practitioner. It's sort of like an artist. You can give all the right tools. You've got Picasso's brush and the palette and the paint and everything, but you're not Picasso. So regardless of what tools you're working with, you still have to have that intuition. You still have to have the judgment, that inspiration in order to get that right, even if it's a very technique-heavy methodology. Now, the flip side of that is the intuitional astrologer. You can get very, that's the loosey-goosey does tend towards that. You can kind of make things up. You can be in a fantasy. You can have emotions coming through. You can have hopes. You can be telling the client what they want to hear. That covers up, it's like paint. It covers up a multitude of sins, the intuitional approach. So that's sort of the downfall of that, is not being able to separate the true intuition and true inspiration from all these other extraneous factors and hopes and dreams and emotions and again, your sort of fantasies about you can see the future or something. So both the technical and the intuitional approach have their downfalls. But what I recognized was that when you talk about rigor in terms of divination, it really does not depend on technique, and it also doesn't necessarily depend on, I'm super divinely inspired. I think a really important technique for rigor is feedback and being honest with yourself about how good you are at prediction. And so what I do, like as an example, for every single horror I've ever done for a client, I have over probably 5,000 of these, is that I do my prediction in writing in advance. I don't know the outcome. I don't know the results. And so I'm actually making a prediction. And I write that down and I list the factors that I relied upon. And then if I get back the results, then again, I write the results down and I've recorded those. I probably have the 5,000 I've done, I probably have like 500, where I got feedback back and I have the results. But I keep those. So I have hundreds and hundreds of these predictions that I made and then I was able to see. Now, a lot of times what people are doing is, whether you're intuitional astrologer or you're using technique-based, is to go ahead and do hindsight predictions. So example, what they'll be doing is looking at Hitler's chart, say, oh, we can see this, this, and this, and this. You can basically find anything you want in any chart. If you know the outcome, you can make any chart fit it. That's not a prediction. And that's actually worse than prediction, because you're fooling yourself into thinking that you're actually making prediction, and you're not. You're not practicing either. Unless you don't know the outcome when you're making that prediction, you're not, it's basically useless, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter whether you are, like I said, technique-based or intuitional. Make a record of that prediction before you know the outcome. And then once you get the results, compare it and then keep a record of that. That's true. That to me is what, a really excellent tool for rigor. Because what you're doing is you're not letting yourself get away with fooling yourself into thinking that you're right. Or, I have these clients too. When you ask a client about your accuracy, they either think you're totally accurate or you're completely inaccurate. They very rarely have a good objective view of the accuracy of the prediction. Whereas if you take it in writing and you take a little bit more, like I said, objective view with yourself, you can see how, how sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. I mean, this is the reality for me with horary. I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but I'm not right all the time. It's amazing how often you can nail stuff. I mean, I just did one recently, and it was just interesting how much the 6th house and the 12th house were showing up in the chart. So I kept saying, there's lots of stress here. And the querent and the quested, it was a relationship question. Their significators were fairly dignified. So I felt like, these are people that, clearly the querent was stronger, so she wanted the relationship more than the person she was asking about. But that person's significator was dignified by triplicity, so they were willing and able. They were a good person. The problem was, again, their significator was close to the 12th house. I think the moon was in the 6th. There was a lot of stress. I said, this is the problem here. Also, there was a lack of connection between the significators. I said, there's just a lot. This is a good person. They're willing and able to have a relationship, but they're under a tremendous amount of stress. And it was funny because that's what the persons came back in the email and said, yeah, this is really what's going on. There's a tremendous amount of stress. So, in that you can say, okay, I was able to nail that. It was the combination, though, of seeing those indicators, and then it was the sense I got of the chart. And those together gave me the accuracy. But the only way you can test that, and the only way you can truly be rigorous with it, is to keep that record of it and to be honest with yourself. Then knowing that, you can help improve going forward. And so that, to me, is really what the rigorous practice is taking the best of, if you think of an academic approach, they're not just making up fantasies. They're trying to base this on, looking at proof, looking at evidence of, from external reality or from these sources. And so we need to follow that example in our own way, though, like in a way that supports our practice. Not that ignores a practice, not that studying practice, but says, no, this is exactly how, this is useful in terms of implementing practice. So that's one of the things I've been trying to do is to, again, the whole metastructural idea is not like to be an observer and deconstruct stuff and tear it apart, but to say, how can we understand these metastructures to be better practitioners? So that's what I would say about it. It's like, whether you're in a, like I said, in a more, a divination that's more intuitional, or you're more technique-based, again, that's completely up to your personality, up to your, your fate, what you're drawn to. Well, we can all join together and show some rigor and objectivity about it by making sure we focus on actual prediction where we don't know the outcome, then keeping a record of it to keep us honest about it. So that's what I would say about it, is that's sort of my vision of, is not that people, need to follow exactly what I do or even be a medieval Renaissance astrologer like I am. But what I would urge people to is to find this middle path between the loosey-goosey and the academic approach that has a rigorous approach focused on actual prediction, and then being honest with ourselves about the accuracy of how good our predictions are. And you'll find the more and more you do that, that your accuracy will improve. You can become better at technique, obviously, but you can also become better at your intuition. So I just thought that was interesting. It occurred to me as I was doing that previous video that I needed to go ahead and say, okay, let's talk about rigor. So I'm excited about these sort of things. They're sort of bubbling up, and I've been able to have all sorts of inspiration as far as doing these videos. I've been getting great feedback, and I just appreciate being able to put these videos out there and appreciate all the amazing feedback and support I've been getting from everybody. So again, check out Renaissance Astrology, all the rest of the videos on the channel, and the Renaissance Astrology website.